Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing today on the nomination of Penny Pritzker to be the next Secretary of Commerce, and I want to welcome Ms. Pritzker to our committee. Ms. Pritzker has an extensive background in the private sector, and I look forward to hearing how she will apply that experience to achieve positive results at the Department of Commerce and for the nation's economy should she be confirmed. The Department of Commerce is tasked with promoting business, facilitating job creation, and spurring economic growth. Unfortunately, our nation's unemployment rate is still at an unacceptable level, 7.5%. In December of 2007, the unemployment rate measured at 5%, and it peaked at 10% in October of 2009. Clearly, much work remains to be done to get the unemployment rate back to pre-recession levels, particularly when you factor in the 21.9 million Americans who are unemployed or underemployed. Despite positive reports in other areas of the economy, job growth remains very slow, and so far in 2013, monthly job growth has lagged behind the monthly averages experienced last year. We in Congress must make jobs and the economy our top priority, and that means we must strive to do what we can to unleash the great American entrepreneurial spirit. We need to remove needless and outdated regulation and reduce burdensome tax rates for businesses of all sizes. We must craft policies that spur the private sector to take risks, to create jobs, and we must also seek to restrain the government's inclination to intervene in the marketplace. In other words, we should let the free market choose economic winners and losers rather than having the government do so. That's why I believe it's critically important to have a Secretary of Commerce who has a strong record of accomplishment in creating jobs in the private sector, someone who knows the challenges and how to overcome the barriers the private sector faces in creating jobs. I believe the next Commerce Secretary must be a strong advocate for trade and open markets for America's farmers and manufacturers. The next Commerce Secretary must also work to create a more business-friendly environment. It's no secret that the Obama administration has been criticized for adopting a negative attitude toward business, which I believe contributes to some of the economic problems we've observed over the last several years. There's a significant uncertainty in the private sector, and many within the business community are wary of the Obama administration's predisposition to have the government intervene in the free market and its failure to adopt pro-growth policies. I believe we must have a cabinet official who is strongly committed to economic expansion, trade promotion, and policies that strengthen our competitiveness. So I look forward to hearing Ms. Pritzker discuss her priorities with respect to these issues. I'm particularly interested in hearing about Ms. Pritzker's experience serving as on the President's Council for Jobs and Competitiveness. I'm also interested in Ms. Pritzker's views on making more federal spectrum available for commercial use, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman. The Commerce Department is uniquely situated to play a role in this matter, particularly with one of its agencies, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. Should Ms. Pritzker be confirmed, I would ask that she focus some of her time and energy on dealing with this issue, especially with respect to freeing up the 755 to 780 megahertz band. I hope that we can work together to resolve this issue because if we're successful, it will ignite a great deal of economic activity across the country, assist in funding a nationwide public safety network, and ultimately help to ease the nation's debt by bringing billions of dollars into the Treasury from the auctioning of this valuable spectrum to the private sector. Finally, I would note that some concerns have been raised about Ms. Pritzker's role with and position as a beneficiary of an offshore tax haven, as well as her role in the failure of Superior Bank back in 2000-2001. I've been in communication with her on these matters, would appreciate her continuing to work with us after the hearing to answer all the questions I and other members of the committee may have before we report her nomination. Should she be confirmed, I hope that Ms. Pritzker will be a strong voice on the President's Cabinet for lowering regulatory burdens, lowering tax rates on businesses large and small, and promoting job creation in the private sector. On a personal note, Ms. Pritzker, I want to thank you for your willingness to serve our country. While I don't expect we're going to see eye to eye on every issue, it's important that we have individuals with experience in business who are willing to put that experience to work in the service of our nation. Thank you again for holding this hearing, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to hearing Ms. Pritzker's testimony. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Pritzker, the justifiable public outrage over the actions taken by the IRS against conservative organizations underscores how critical it is for government leaders to scrupulously honor the public trust. My question is, what, if anything, can you pledge this committee regarding your commitment to safeguard the trust that would be bestowed upon you as a Cabinet Secretary?
Well, Senator, I think that it's important that I bring my core values to the table if I'm confirmed as Secretary of Commerce. And for me, being known as someone who is a trustworthy, someone of high integrity and high ethics is what I strive to be. And so I hope that I will set the tone at the Commerce Department if I'm confirmed, such that the trust, that the taxpayer, that the all Americans can have, as well as the Senate and the House, in the work of the Commerce Department is something that you'll have full faith in.
Great. We've all watched this week, and with what happened in Moore, Oklahoma, and our hearts and prayers go out to the people who were struck by that deadly and devastating tornado this week. At the same time, we can be grateful that the warnings and alerts issued by the Commerce Department's National Weather Service helped to save lives. As you learn firsthand, if confirmed, you will learn, I should say, every department and agency is making tough choices in the face of necessary budget cuts, and so it does require proper planning and prioritization. It's no longer an option to do that. Can we have your commitment that if confirmed, you'll ensure that budget cuts are made in ways that prioritize funding for the Department's public safety missions, like the delivery of timely warnings about severe weather?
Senator, the work of the National Weather Service is vital, as we know, to not just property, but frankly to lives, most importantly to the lives of Americans. We've seen this, as you said, in Oklahoma. We've seen it in Hurricane Sandy. We've seen it in the floods that we've been experiencing in the Midwest. They remind us of the critical mission of saving lives that the National Weather Service does. If I'm confirmed, I will work with the National Weather Service to make sure that the impacts of our budgets don't impact the critical mission that the National Weather Service provides.
And can you pledge to us as well that you'll work with this committee to find efficiencies and ways to stretch taxpayer dollars further when it comes to the various responsibilities of the Commerce Department?
Senator, in my 27 years in business, I've had to learn to stretch dollars, and so that's something that I have experience in. I think the first thing that's required is to put in place good leadership throughout the organization that shares the same approach, and then work with that leadership to be able to identify ways that the Commerce Department, if I'm confirmed, can be as effective but more efficient.
Okay. As I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks, some have criticized the administration as being anti-business. In 2010, the chairman of the Business Roundtable and CEO of Verizon famously said the administration was fostering, and this is, I quote, an increasingly hostile environment for investment and job creation, end quote. If confirmed, you would bring a track record of entrepreneurial activity in the private sector as well as service on the President's Jobs Council to the position of Secretary. If confirmed, what will you do to foster a more pro-business attitude within the administration? And maybe as a follow-up to that, could you provide some examples of actions that you've taken or strategies that you've used successfully to create jobs in the private sector?
Well, Senator, when the President asked me if I was interested in taking this position, we discussed very clearly his desire that I serve, if I was confirmed in this position, as a bridge between the administration and the business community, a role he saw as, if I could play that role as part of his economic team, that he felt that the relationship would be improved. And that's something that I look forward to working very hard on. In terms of examples of when I have created jobs, Senator, I started a senior living company that today employs about 3,500 people. I've started a real estate investment firm that today employs dozens of people. I've started a number of businesses as well as grown businesses and grown the number of employees. Frankly, when I think about my job as a business person, the thing that made me most nervous was to try and make the best decisions that I could because I knew how many lives were impacted by those decisions. And the ability to be not just a business leader but a job creator is something that I've been very proud of and something that I will bring that experience to the role if I'm confirmed as Secretary of Commerce.
Thank you. And Ms. Pritzker, I need to ask this question. There's been a lot written about this, as you know, but with regard to the failure of the Superior Bank in 2001, it was a bank that was one of the early leaders in subprime lending. Some of your defenders have stated that you had no active role in management of the bank for 7 years prior to the bank's failure. But according to a report issued by the FDIC's Inspector General, concerns were raised by the Office of Thrift Supervision about the bank's mortgage banking practices as early as 1993, when you were still chair of the bank's board. In addition, others have pointed out that you continue to serve as a board member for Superior Bank's holding company and sat on the bank's audit committee until its failure. Could you just tell us what role you played at the bank in the years leading up to Superior Bank's failure in 2001?
Well, Senator, thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell the story. So my Uncle Jay and a friend of his bought a bank in 1989. It was a failed bank. I was never an officer of the bank, nor was I involved in management. I was chairman of the board from 1991 to 1994, when the primary purpose or activity at the bank was to clean up the balance sheet of the bank, which had a lot of problem loans. I stepped down as chairman of the bank, and the bank maintained its own separate bank board 7 years before the bank failed. Regulators concluded in 2000 that certain assets on the bank's balance sheet were overvalued after a change in accounting rules. On the holding company, what one looks at is the balance sheet and the financial statements and deals with all the subsidiaries of the holding company. Unfortunately, when the problems arose, my uncle had passed away, recently passed away. So I stepped in on behalf of the ownership of the 50% ownership of my family to try and salvage the situation. Unfortunately, those negotiations failed and the bank failed. And so then, shortly thereafter, I went to the FDIC voluntarily, and the family only owned 50% of the bank, but I voluntarily went to the FDIC and said, you know, this was post 9/11, and as I said, I come from a family that is very patriotic, and I said to the head of the FDIC, this country's been very good to our family. We need to make this situation right. We'd like to negotiate something to make this right for the depositors. And that negotiation ensued, and my family voluntarily agreed to pay $450 million. I was not on the audit committee of the board. That's something that is not right. And it was the right thing for us to do, because both for the depositors and for us as a family.
Let me just, a quick follow-up, if I might,
Sure.
Just a minute here, Mr. Chairman. So ultimately, there were a number of the bank's uninsured depositors that had claims that they lost over $100,000 of the savings, including one who reportedly deposited her entire retirement account with Superior a month before it failed. My question is, in two parts, what do you have to say to those depositors who lost significant sums of money because of this venture, and what lessons did you learn from your experience at Superior Bank that will inform your role as Secretary of Commerce if you're confirmed?
Well, Senator, I regret the failure of Superior Bank. It was not an outcome or a situation that I feel very badly about that. The lessons that I've learned are really about good management, good governance structure, the importance of diversification and risk management, transparency, and having a solid governance.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, Mr. Chairman, I think it's just you and me. So we're about ready to wrap this up, and the unpleasantness is about over for Ms. Pritzker. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to ask one other question, and for a minute here I'm going to channel Senator Grassley. But some have criticized the fact that you're a beneficiary of some offshore tax avoidance schemes, mm-hmm. and that it's hypocritical for the President to nominate cabinet members who benefited from offshore tax havens when he's criticized that practice for others. How do you respond to that criticism?
Well, Senator, I am the beneficiary of offshore family trusts that were set up when I was a little girl. I didn't create them. I don't direct them. I don't control them. I have asked the trustee to appoint and remove themselves and to appoint a U.S. trustee. But I have complied with all of the disclosure obligations, et cetera, that have been required of me in this process.
Let me ask you one other quick question, if I might. One of the areas under your purview is going to be the administration and enforcement of anti-dumping laws. And the laws intended to prevent domestic industries from being destroyed by imports that are sold here at unfairly low or dumped prices. Commerce Department determines the precise amount of duties that must be collected to increase the price of dumped imports to a non-injurious level. And estimated $400 to $500 million in anti-dumping duties billed on 4 different types of agricultural imports from China have remained uncollected. And even though Their payment is secured by specialized single-entry customs bonds, which are referred to as new shipper bonds, that were issued by well-known U.S. insurance companies. The question is, will you commit to provide Congress with a full accounting of all the new shipper bonds that secure anti-dumping duties on these agricultural imports from China, and a plan for collecting the unpaid dumping duties secured by these bonds?
So, Senator, I'm not per se familiar with exactly what you're discussing. I know what anti-dumping is, but I will look into it, and I will commit to work with you on this issue.
There are a number of honey producers in South Dakota who would be very happy to hear that answer. A lot of transshipped honey from China, and the enforcement mechanisms that are available to prevent that don't get effectively utilized. So we would welcome your help with that particular issue.
Well, making sure that not just honey producers, but our American companies are on a level playing field, and that our laws are not being skirted is an important objective. And if I'm confirmed, I will work on that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.